Hi, and welcome to the DIY Photo Organising Podcast, focusing on topics to help you with your photo management. I am Fiona from Photo Helper.
And I am Chantal from Photos in Order. Today we are talking about our 2020 photo book.
Yay!
That's what everyone wants to do, photo books, yearbooks,
Yes,
I should say.
Absolutely.
So we thought we'd give you a bit of a head start so that we can prepare that book. And once that December is over, can simply add that month and have it printed and all is done.
Yes. Get a head start. I think it's a great idea. So what are some of the things that we'll cover in this podcast episode today, Chantal?
Okay, so to quickly summarize it a bit before we go into detail, first of all, we want to talk about how to create layouts for each month and what that involves. We'll talk about design aspects of the books and also about the stories that we want to tell, captions, stories, a bit of journaling. So we'll talk about that, and then, a bit more specific possibly about what vendor or software to use to build it online, offline, the differences that you have. And then, as I mentioned before, in January, all you got to do is to add December and print it.
Perfect.
So,
that sounds like a plan.
So tell us a bit more about the planning.
All right. So what we would suggest you do is if you start planning first, I think that will just give you a really good head start. So the types of things to consider about is maybe how many spreads on the in the book per month you might like to allocate to. Mm-hmm. So we would count a spread as the open book with the left and the right side. So one page is on the left, the other on the right. So the whole thing is then the spread. So you might say, if you just want a quick little book or something like that, you might do one or two spreads per month. There's no right or wrong with this. But thinking about it ahead of time really does help in that planning. So then when you come to the choosing of your photos, it just helps you be more selective or put them all in there. So that is definitely something to have a think about. And then also, if you think as you're planning your book, you can think about whether or not you like the design of having, say, one main feature photo on the page, or if you're quite happy to have maybe in that spread you have one feature photo and 9 small photos. Mm-hmm. So just thinking about that sort of type of the design of the page and how it's going to look in the book will also help you when you're choosing your photos.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So what's the next thing we could start to look at?
Yeah, with choosing the photos, that's probably the next step. And some people might go ahead and just simply choose their photos and don't really plan. And as we said, there's nothing wrong with that. It's personal preference, a lot of that. And you just might want to choose your photos and go ahead and design your book and see what comes out and have a play with it. Now, when you choose photos, though, it's also good to know with the printing, when you bring a photo into the software to design the book, you can then, of course, crop the photos or zoom them in and out. So let's say you've got, something in the background of a photo, you can still use that in the book because you can zoom it in and design it so that you can see better what is in that photo. Things like that are also to be considered when you choose photos. Oftentimes I try to take, but it's not always possible, lighter photos. Oftentimes when you print them in the books, they become a little bit darker than they look on the screen. So, if they're light and fresh, that might give you a better result when it's printed. But it's not always possible, if you've got a precious photo that you want in a book, so be it. So it's just a bit dark.
Yeah, exactly. And there's some great different apps and software out there to lighten photos. So if people want to get a little bit creative, this would be the time to do that. So with things like that, I would suggest that you grab all those photos first, and then when they're all together, then you can have a look at doing any of the lightning and stuff like that before you get into the actual importing into the software.
Yeah, and oftentimes you can actually in the software still edit and make them lighter, so the contrast, things like that. Some are pretty basic. Other softwares allow you to do a bit more.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's good. And as far as then, when you're looking at those photos and choosing which ones to pop in, feature photos are always fabulous. So just be mindful of which ones that you would like. Now, you could also go back and listen to some of our other episodes about metadata. And that's one way. If you have done that throughout the year, you could use the benefit of having done favourites and things like that before, and then use those. Just do a search through your whichever way you've got your photo hub, and they'll all pop up. Just magically appear. It's fabulous. So how many photos do you think, Chantal, is a fair and reasonable? If someone says, just say they have never done their photo book before, this is their first time, and we're really proud of you if it is. We really encourage you to give this a go, of doing a yearbook. How many photos do you think, or have you used before? Do you sort of pick a number that you what do you do?
Yeah, I don't have a magical number. And it probably also depends a bit on the year and how much has happened during the year and how many photos one's got. But yeah, probably, I would say 100 is probably a minimum. Most people have more. Maybe around the 300. But I've done photo books for clients with over 600 photos in a year. And that also works. I think it's also a lot of personal preference, and we'll talk more about the design in a minute, but some people don't like small photos in their books. So, and if you've got so many photos, then that creates you a really huge book. But if you don't mind, like what you said before, maybe a feature photo on one page, and then the next page you have like 9 small photos and sort of like a collage or something, like a grid, then you can of course use many more photos. And I quite like to play with these things in design, but it's a lot of it is personal preference. And not all photos are good for as a feature photo or as a smaller photo, and so but probably around 300-400. How about you?
Oh, absolutely, it varies, but I think, and I've done a few where I've used that sort of collage look where the feature photo then is the chosen one, but the others tell such a funny story or something, in the lead up to that event, whatever has happened, the dog's run in the river and shaken and the mud's gone everywhere or something like that. So, and they're great, and then the captions, obviously, which we'll get to in a minute, they will tell that story. So, I think in the choosing of the photos, I would say just pop it in the folder. We're going to talk about what to do with those photos next, but just grab those photos because you can always just not use it. But it's much easier to have it there and make that decision when you're designing, then to go back into the hub and get that one, find where it was again. And it's just easier if you, as you're thinking about selecting these photos. And what I would say when you're doing this selection and choosing your photos, don't overthink it at this stage. It really is... Our whole objective on this podcast is for you to have a book at the end of it. And so really when you're choosing your photos, just grab them. Just go, yep, this one, yep, that one. If it's not the perfect photo, that's okay. You can go back and grab that perfect one at the end. But we just really want you to make sure that you've at least, done this step of going through, because you can... you can get sidetracked. People can get sidetracked. The amount of times I've worked with a client where they're like, yep, I'll just choose those photos for you. And they just, they kind of get a bit bogged down. But so definitely just make it happen. Set yourself some time and then choose those photos and highlight your favourites. And then what do we do with them?
So I was just going to ask you that. So once we've chosen them, what we suggest is that you create a separate folder, like a temporary folder on your computer. You call it 2020 yearbook, and you copy and paste your photos that you've chosen into that folder. Now, knowing us, you will know that we never recommend or say copy any photos. That's exactly what we usually want to avoid at all price. But for a photo book creation, it might just be the easiest way to do it. The important thing is that once you've got your book in your hands, you will go, and the last step in your workflow, you will delete that folder with the copies, because otherwise you might end up in a mess again eventually.
Yeah.
So that's just a temporary folder, and we just think that's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah. So just to recap on that, you've gone into your hub, choosing the photos, copy those photos that are going to be in your yearbook, and copy and paste them into a new folder. And then you can put your hub away safely, and you've already got your backups and all of that kind of stuff. So this is then just a working folder that you're going to have on your computer usually. And then we go into the next step.
Exact.
Which is the fun part of the design.
Yeah.
Design stage. So the first thing we want you to have a think about, obviously, here is choosing your supplier. So there's a few different things that we would suggest that you consider. There's so many different options out there now. There really is a great range, and that is a range that will bring you, changes in price, changes in quality of the actual book that you get, the sizing. They can have tiny little pocket-sized ones. You can have huge, big things. There really is a lot of options out there now, which is fabulous. Just have a look online and see. Some things to consider is whether or not you're going to do the design of your book online on the supplier's software. That's an option. You could also do the design of your book offline. You can design this outside of any supplier and then save it. If you're a bit more tech savvy, you can do that. In Lightroom or something, Adobe products, InDesign and things like that. But there's a whole range of different options that you could do that. Or some of the suppliers even have an offline option.
Yes, I was just going to say that. Yeah. Momento, which is our favourite, you probably know by now. Yep. They offer that. They let you download the software and you can do everything offline. Yeah. I like that.
I do too. Yeah, they're fabulous. So what are some of the other things that that people could consider when they're looking at choosing their suppliers?
For example, where is it actually printed?
Yep.
In Australia, unfortunately, a lot is outsourced offshore. It's oftentimes hard to find local supplies. So this is... But, that's not important for everyone. I personally like to use local businesses. So that is a criteria when I choose suppliers. Where is it printed? And also, quality. I would say in photo albums or photo books, generally what you pay is what you get. So the real cheap ones, that's what you get. It is going to be cheap. It is going to fall apart after not very much usage. When you looked at it 5 times, it might already start to fall apart. Doesn't have to be that way, but so there are huge differences. And what was another one that we saw?
I was just going to say, with the local, obviously, we're talking about Memento there in Sydney with us in Australia, but for our overseas listeners, you can have a look at your local, whatever that is, and just consider those options as well, and delivery times and things like that.
Yeah.
So once you've chosen a supplier, then we get into the fun part of the design. Be aware, one of the great things about these software, there's a few different options, but the main decision to think initially is whether or not you're going to use their autofill option, which is great. If you've made your copy, you've got a folder, you go into the software and then you upload all of the photos. Once you've done that, you can then often have it build a book for you automatically. Obviously, it's not knowing what ones are your feature photos in that. It does. Some of them are pretty good, actually. And look, it's a good start for some people. Like I said before, our objective here is to get a book completed. So, if that's what's going to happen for you, if that's not going to be a stumbling block of design, go ahead and design it. But if it might be, try that autofill as an option if it's got that as one of the software design.
And you can always change it. Yeah. You can. That's what I usually do. I autofill it. And then I tweak it. I change the layout and I move the photos around if necessary. I find that still less work than, creating 100 pages manually, each one. But yeah.
They're great. Some of the software out there is fabulous. You can swap them so easily. You can zoom in easily.
Yes.
Even if you found a photo, if it's chosen a photo that you're wanting to zoom in to have it as the feature, they're great. There's some really good options, and also the borders, whether or what you want borders, and you can play around with those settings in that design. And just know it's a bit of a learning curve if you haven't done this before with any software. But they really are. They're pretty intuitive. You just go in.
And again, it depends also on your style, what you like. I like minimalistic look, so I don't do embellishments and frames and stuff like that usually. Possibly, on a special feature page or something, yes, sometimes, but not usually. So I keep it easy, which also makes it quicker, of course.
Yep.
But some like to really, decorate these pages with all these different options, and that just takes a bit of time.
Yeah. It's like our digital scrapbooking that we had when we got that episode 2. We talked about that.
Yeah, that's right.
And there's some great designs out there for that. Yeah. So it depends on what your focus is and what kind of a book you want. So one of the exciting things that we find in books that we see is such a difference when people do go to this effort, and that is the comments or the stories, captions, headings, putting some detail in. And Chantal, I'd love you to share a little bit about that. I know that you've got some good knowledge you can share, or just encouragement for people in this area.
Yeah, that's right. I've just done actually a course myself to learn how to write stories and, how to document things.
Yeah.
With Katie, and she will be actually one of our guests in one of the upcoming episodes, and she will tell you everything about story writing and jotting them down.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, she's awesome. And I learned so much. And we all know, yes, it's important to have the story, but also how it's written. It can make a difference, and it makes it just so much more valuable, I find personally, when you've got a little story that goes with the photo. Not with every single photo. You don't have to write a story on every page. Again, some people do yearbooks, there's even hardly a caption. There might be only the titles and not much more. Others love to journal, like people that do Project Life.
Oh, yep.
They do a lot of journaling, and there's a lot of text always involved but not everyone, again. It's, personal preference. And it also takes time, of course. So again, what you said, Fiona, keep it simple, add the story here and there, but, don't go too far. Get it done. That's better.
That's it.
Better done than perfect. So
that's our motto.
But it
on this
does make
episode.
a difference. It makes it more interesting for others to actually look at the book even if you share it with your own family, usually only that's the main, people you want to share it with. But it's more interesting to go back and read these stories or a funny episode and things like that. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. So I think that sort of covers really the main topic here as to, how to do the yearbook or things to consider and things like that. And we do go over this. We have gone over this a few times, but really, done is better than perfect.
Yes.
And we decided that we would release this episode and record and do this for you in December, because the year's just about done. So if you get started now, then, as soon as December's finished, you can just press print and you're good to go.
Awesome.
I know. So try it, because before too long, January's come and gone, and then I really should do my 2020 book. What a year it's been.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. I mean, no one in the world has been untouched by the events of this year.
No.
So it'll be a different yearbook. For those of you that have done yearbooks before, and this is an encouragement to get started on your book for this year. It'll definitely be different types of photos, maybe more, maybe not as many photos that people have taken because they haven't been as many places. And one of the suggestions just before we wrap up that you had about printing, Chantal, what was that for?
Yeah, I always print 2 of the yearbook because we've got 2 boys, and so I think way ahead. So eventually, each of the boys will take the yearbook with them, and we discussed, should we print a 3rd one even, so that we've got one and the boys have one, but I'm thinking very far ahead because I'm like, but then when I die, or when we both die, and then the kids have a spare one, that they already have one. So let's do 2.
Forward planning.
That's a bit extreme, but, they cost money too. Yeah. So, and we do use not a cheap printer, so 2 is fine. So
I think it's a great idea to consider just printing more than one. For someone else in the family. I think it's great, or even for grandparents or something like that. It's just a really great, obviously a lot of effort you've put into it, and a good collection of the photos.
And one thing we forgot to mention, when you print, wait for the next special. Don't ever pay the full price for a photo book. All these vendors, they run specials all the time. Design it, have it ready, and when the next special comes up, that's when you print. Yeah.
And the other thing too is, it's so important. Obviously, we talk a lot about the backup and having extra copies and things like backup of your hub. And these yearbooks, they really are just another way to ensure the preservation of these memories and photos. So it's a practical way to have another secure effort with your photos there. So fabulous. All right.
Okay.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today on our podcast. We're thrilled to say we're actually in person today, together.
In the same room.
I know you can't see us, and that doesn't make much difference to our lovely listeners, but for us it was nice to be able to do that. But so please head over to our social media pages, and if you've got any questions, as always, we would love to hear from you. And don't forget to leave a review. As always, we love feedback. And you can email us or just directly by contacting us via the social media channels or our website.
Very good.
So I am Fiona from Photo Helper.
And I'm Chantal from Photos in Order. Thanks again for tuning in, and happy photo organising.
Bye.
Bye.